Good morning. Sorry for the little delay, little or too much delay. We had to change our classroom because yesterday we had another one, so we had to transfer everything, all our equipment. That's why it was a delay. It will not happen again, I promise. Good morning. I'm Theo Nico. I'm one of the co-founders of the Greek Economic Forum. I would like to welcome you all to our annual conference of the Greek Economic Forum in Modern Greece here in the Harvard campus. Thank you all for your attendance and your kind interest in our endeavor. Before we start, we would like to thank from the bottom of our hearts all the people that believed in us and supported us from the very beginning. Our parents, our mentors, our professors, our supporters, our sponsors, and friends, and many, many other people. And furthermore, I would like to express our sincere gratitude and special thanks to Harvard College Hellenic Society for their hospitality, and our beloved Vasiliki, Dr. Vasiliki Ratti. Without her, nothing of this would be possible today. We would like to give a short insight about us and what the Greek Economic Forum is about. The Greek Economic Forum was created by a group of young people, actually by those people right there, Antonios Pitaras, Evangelos Angelatos, and Christos Soho, and me as well. Our goal was, we created the forum because we wanted to take an action as a response to the austerity policy in our country, Greece, and the false picture that was built from this policy. Our vision is to create a modern Greece, to prove that Greece is a country capable of recovery and stand out among the other countries of the world. Our desire is to see our home nation involved in international affairs for positive reasons through innovation and development projects. We want to reorientate its identity, not only to reestablish its reputation, but also to show that it's capable of building a better future. Help our youth to utilize its knowledge and qualifications, be productive, be positive, be proud about their country and themselves, create a global Greek network that would benefit everyone and in the end, the whole country. We want to use all the great ideas and solutions we pick up from our conferences and our seminars and address them to our government and have a direct effect in its healthy development. Thank you very much. We'll begin shortly. I would like to ask on the podium Ms. Ifigenia Kanora, the Consul General of Greece here in Boston. Thank you very much.
Καλημέρα. Hello, good morning, and thank you all for being here. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for giving me actually the opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. As you are aware, much has been said about the Greek crisis lately in the international media, and critics by experts and non-experts point out past mistakes and create a debate about the possible collapse of the Greek economy. However, while it is of course important to look and learn from the errors of history, learn from our mistakes actually, looking into what went wrong is not the reason why we're here today. While the government, as I'm sure you know, is continuing the negotiations, trying to achieve what we call an honorable compromise, a mutual acceptable solution. That actually this is not something easy as you can guess, because what they are trying to do is strike the right balance between respecting the recent electoral mandate that they got, and at the same time respect the rules of the game. We are a member of the Eurozone. We tend to stay in the Eurozone, so we have to play with the rules. So this is not an easy task for the government. But while the government is doing her job, initiatives like this one should, and I totally agree with your philosophy, targets to the future. It's true that Greece precariously hangs in the balance of global financial uncertainty and political awareness, and we should know we should. But however, it's crucial to understand that our future, Greece's future, by no means lies in Brussels or in Washington in the IMF, in the hands of IMF. The Greek opportunity resides, and it's my strong belief, in Greece's most valuable, natural resource, most valuable asset, and this is her people. Intellectual capital, well motivated, well educated young people like yourselves are looking for an opportunity to transform actually their projects, their brilliant ideas into real commercial projects and you know um, promote them, access the international and the European markets. Um, yes, Greece is affronted with an unprecedented challenge. I'm sure you all know that. We need to work hard. We need to adopt a series of reforms that would, first of all, rebuild and restore our international credibility, but also, put the foundation for a solid economic recovery, because this is what we need. We don't need something, temporary solution. We need a solid, long-term, recovery for our economy. So in this process of recovery, initiatives like this one are, in my opinion, very helpful. And they are helpful for two reasons, mainly because they support the necessary and long overdue changes in a series of policies in the public sector, and also they are, without any doubt, they have a positive impact on the formation of policies and systems needed to empower both short-term growth and long-term recovery, of course. So in order to move forward, I would say that Greece should focus on four areas of, let's say, action of interest. The first one is I mentioned, to identify and enact policies that would promote growth. This also includes, of course, necessary continued reform of the public sector and the administration, while maintaining fiscal responsibility, avoid excess, reducing excess, and also adopt a series of supply side initiatives as opposed to only austerity measures. Secondly, and this is also crucial, we should finally recognize our priceless spot on the map, our priceless place in geography. Greece sits on the convergence of Europe, Balkans, North Africa, Middle East, and holds more actually waterways than any other country of Europe. Um, Greece is poised to be a leader in geostrategic industries such as logistics, navigation, and security, and also could provide a stable, within a highly unstable region, a stable and accessible hub for energy and commerce. It's crucial to understand, first of all, to understand this and take advantage of, maximize these comparative advantages that we have. Thirdly, we should also work a bit on our, advancing our service sector, and take a lead law, take take make the sector take a role in diversing our economy. And when I'm referring to services, I'm referring to a variety of services, from tourism to communications, and from energy to maritime services, from startups, from promising startups to education and cultural diplomacy. So I mean, there are assets there, and we should definitely work on them. I mean, it's not there is no point in trying to compete Germany in producing cars. We have other competitive advantages we should work on. Finally, it is imperative that civic duty can be restored and confidence can permit social cohesion. Businessmen, intellectual people, other actors in the society should live and work in an environment that respects the rules, where contracts are upheld, where rights and property are well defended. I'm confident that with your help, we will manage to achieve this. I know it's not easy. I know that we all have a lot to do, but we should start from somewhere, and this is a very good start. And I would like to, to sincerely congratulate you for the initiative.
Thank you very much, Ms. Canara, for your kind remarks and on-point comments. We'll continue with Dr. Adigoni Papadimitriou, a professor and chairperson of the Management and Leadership Program, Hellenic College, Holy Cross.
Very good morning, everyone, and thank you. I totally agree with the previous figure. And this particular research that took place a few months ago, taking into consideration opinions from female academics in Greece, probably coincides exactly what we said, but I'm afraid at the end we will see that the government doesn't coincide whatever we believe outside of the country. And maybe we would like to change that, but I don't know how. Before I start, I would like to give you a short background. I studied in the Netherlands. My dissertation was about quality management in Greek higher education. Then I worked in Norway at the University of Oslo as a researcher, and I have about less than 2 years import from Norway to Hellenic College to be professor of management and leadership in order to develop this particular program. My research interest is higher education studies, especially dealing with quality, excellence, and productivity, performance improvement. This is what I do all time. This particular study, as you can see, this is women academics in Greece dealing with changes, challenges, and social responsibility. Why this study? The purpose of the study was to investigate some current challenges due to the legal, economic issues about the Greek women in academia, and dealing with their triple role, the academic triple role, which is teaching, research, and services. I will ask them about their job satisfaction, their motivation, and some gender issues. Greek public universities, most of you, as you are coming from Greece, you know they're very politicized and bureaucratized. Even from 2009 so far, the Ministry of Education support higher education, however, change names continuously every 2-3 years, change Ministry of Education, and change particular higher education policies and regulations. In Greece, a couple of years ago, were 24 universities, 16 technological colleges, and currently in 2015, there are 22 universities. Because due to the economic crisis, new law about mergers, 2 universities does not exist, the remainder are 22 universities. Finance, another issue. This is how universities they operate. If it is a state budget, that means they receive all funded by the government. There's some other European funds, but mostly 90% the state funds the higher education institutions and mostly the public universities in Greece. Funding formula. This comes from for one of my sources. It's very difficult, and even this is on 2011 or 2006. But now it's more difficult. They had to negotiate with the Ministry of Education, they have to negotiate with the Ministry of Economics in order to find out how much money they are going from the state to the universities. And even, as we will see later, there is a lot of problem. There is a financial crisis, all we know. I don't want to spend a lot of time, but this is the reality. Universities in Greece, they suffer, and I know from personal experience. Budget 2009 was they promised that the budget will be about 1 billion. to the universities. And then on 2010, they noted that there is the new Ministry of Education. They said that, oh, we have to decrease this amount. That means minus 25 million. And this is some regulations that happened on 2009. And from 9, 11, 12, and they continue. Just to give you an example, this resources come from accreditation agency in Greece, as they call ADIP. This is from 2011. For instance, on 2009, you can see there is 100. This is several universities. They receive for salaries and also some other operation expenses. And as you can see, there is a lot of decrease for the same amount of departments and for the same, and mostly for more students. As all we know that students monitoring and accepted by the Ministry of Education and not by the universities. Here's some data, 2008, 2009, and 2013-14. There is no more recent data to the statistics. In the statistics in Greece. That means from 2008, 2014, from total faculty, I mean full-time adjunct faculty that they teach, they are able to teach in 2 universities and some other research teaching staff. From 14,000, less than 15,000, now means beginning of 2013, academic year 2013-14, last year was about 10,000. I expect new statistics, probably that did not appear. They promised, I communicate, they told me soon, the statistics that are coming never came. It's about 10,000. Students, undergraduate active students, they remain 173 active, that they can study for 4 years or 6. Now, 13-14 was about 180 students total registered, because some of you probably know that in Greece a year ago some students they can remain forever. The last government just said those students they have to take out this population from the register, but the new government just took back this policy, and the students that they deleted for the register, just they came back. That means more or less the amount, the students, the enrolled students at the Greek university so far is about 4,336, included graduate students and doctoral students. From a very scary number that I would like to point out, this is the graduate student, enrolled graduates 2013, is 37,000, while on 2010-2011 were 46,000. The same with doctoral students, 35,000 enrolled doctoral students 2010-11, while last year enrolled was 23. These numbers need some questions and need some answers. Maybe the crisis, this is probabilities. I don't know why. But the decreased number of those students seems that students, they don't have money to continue their education. Some graduate programs, they're with a fee. Families, they don't have money to support their kids. That means, this is my opinion, that this for 46, almost 10,000, the number decreased. Same with the doctoral students, from 37, 23. Either some of them, I don't know, there are not projects, they are not funded projects to support doctoral studies. And in order to be a doctoral student, as if you're, for those that we have our PhD, you need a lot of money, a lot of effort, and support by the universities, not by family grants. And this is in a chronological sequence of the reforms in higher education. The first Hellenic University of Photo established in 1837, and several 1982 was the first frame law for higher education institutions. Quality assurance law on 2005, 2007 there is another transformation law, 2009 crisis hit Greece. 2011, the new law about mergers, and currently we have 22 universities. On the first frame law requires, because I would like to give you a flavor, what is the teaching, the research, and the services, what is requested by law. In that particular framework, they said that professors, associate, assistant professors, lecturers, they have to teach, to research, and to have administrative work. This is the triple role of academics. Also, the new law from 2011, there are three categories: professor, associate, professor, assistant. While the lecturers probably will come again because there is a current at the Greek Parliament, the law about the new higher education law 2015, and I don't know how this law will deal with the new realities. However, this study took into consideration changes regarding the 2011 law, that is professor, all the faculty, they had to perform evaluation every year, they have to teach, they were able to teach abroad, and also differences in promotion and differences in organization at the university. As we talk about females in Greek university, here's some numbers. Total number about the academics to 2013, and as you can see, females about 22,063. This is the total. Very few professors, several associate professors, more assistant, and lecturers as well. And at the age of female academics comes from they're from 88, and currently those that they born on 47, they have already retired, or they have to retire by by August. The total percentage of academic in Greek universities, as you can see, there's few universities in Greece. There is about less than 45% are female academic, mostly with Harokopio in Athens, Pandion, and Peloponnese University in Athens, Kapodistriako, and University of Macedonia in Thessaloniki, Piraeus University Technical in Crete, and Metrovio in Athens. The engineering, as you can see, there is a lot of less female professors in those universities. In periphery, there is a differences, the percentage of participant females in periphery universities and in Athens, and there is no any trend. There is an up and down. That means you can say that in periphery there is more females, or in Athens there is a mix. And in this slide, you can see the percentage of female academics and undergraduate female students in each university. As you can see, the number of female is around 70%, but at the same time, the number of the percentage of female academics is less than 40 or 20 in some universities. However, representation of female professors at universities is not common in Greece. It is similar all over the world, how many the females represent all subjects at the university. It's not something unique that happened. And in Greece, most of the students, there are females at the undergraduate, at the graduate, but later we will see that females, they disappear for leadership position, for academic position, and we need to know where those females they went. The data, small scale, 25 interviews with women academics in 10 out of 20 universities. Telephone interviews took place October, November, and mostly 12 to 4 o'clock in order to have some, due to the differences between US and Greece. And all interviews I have in Greek, maximum 25 minutes. 12 professors, 5 associates, 7 assistants, 1 lecturer. Discipline, all those professors that are coming for those disciplines, for the different disciplines. And what I asked if there is any changes regarding teaching, research, services, and changes regarding to quality assurance law that came on 2005. And for the several reasons, quality assurance became active on 2009 total. New to the new law, 2011, due to mergers, because some universities, some departments merged with others, and the economic crisis. I asked also how many hours they work, if they remember before and after the crisis, about the job satisfaction, gender issues, and the motivation under these circumstances. Here are the results. Most of the professors, most of the female academics, they mention no changes regarding to quality assurance. Means not. This is to no changes regarding to teaching, research, and services. As you can see, no changes in teaching and research, but as you can see, 20, they says there are a lot of changes regarding the green one over here, 20. This is reflect services, more administrative work. Changes due to higher education law. Teaching, 21, they have changes. One, research, very few changes, a little about services due to mergers mostly. And this results because most of, not most, half of, because all those interviews just make phone calls. If I found a professor from all over, they answer the phone. They became from merged university, either from departments that they are not exist anymore, and there are either in Athens or in Thessaloniki, transfer, or there are locals that they accept all those transfer faculty and students. That's why they had this type of teaching. Services, more or less all, they have changes in services. A lot of work, a lot of pressure on them. Here, some what they mention, problem with the courses at the labs. There is no funding for supplies. They can support the students even with copies, photocopies. Support staff retire without any replacement. That's why they have to do everything by themselves. And they teach more hours due to the mergers. And some because they have to reorganize the curriculum. Changes due to economic crisis. There is no money for conference. Their focus is on to publish on journals rather than to go abroad and to participate in conference, symposium, and other events. Very hard to fund to find resources for their research and to support their PhD, the master students. More work needed in the proposals. They need to develop high quality proposals, especially for the European grants. And also several, they lost their research budget due to the economic crisis. Another main issue that there is no trust from abroad. That means that for several research projects, in order to buy some equipment, whatever, they have to prepay those in order to receive it from abroad to Greece, because simply they don't trust that they will receive the money, because some years ago was totally different. And this is how the research takes place in Greek universities. Economic crisis, administrative staff retired, and there is a law that universities, they can replace their administrative, even the professor. They can, one retired, second, third. That means there are departments with one professor, with a zero professor, or with academic staff. That means it's very hard. There is no replacement, and they struggle to teach. Due to the mergers, several students at the laboratory, they have to be, before was about 20 students. Now they have to teach the same course for 200 students, which is quite difficult. Satisfaction. This is a brief overview of the particular of the data. And I ask, okay, you mentioned ABC, all those difficulties that we know more or less outside, but are you satisfied with the environment? Openly they said that they dissatisfied with the working environment as a whole. Five, they found their environment neutral. They say so, it's okay. And 12, they commented that the working environment was very satisfactory. Depend the university, depend the department, there is total. Regarding gender issues, really, I didn't have a lot of input about gender issues. Most of them, they mentioned that they have to have the same ability and effort if they are men or females or males. There is no any gender issue. And even they didn't face any gender issue in their promotion, in their academic life. That means was not the case. And one professor in music, she told me that art does not recognize genders. That means it's the same, doesn't mean if you are female or male. That means gender issue was not the case. Source of motivation, and this is the most important lessons that we have to take with us. What is those females they motivated to continue to teach, even if they're unsatisfied, because all those answers, they're coming not for those that they satisfy with the environment, but also they're coming because they say, okay, you are not satisfied, but what you make you for quality of teaching, quality of research, quality of support services. Say, I'm in love with my research and I want to be okay with my conscience. Personal desire for research and respect for their profession. My motivation is the quality of our students, I mean the Greek students. Almost every year, better students are coming to our department, biology, and we need to offer them quality education even under these circumstances. We need to respect our students and help them to complete their studies and to help our university to remain open. Several also noted that it's a difficult time. We need to show our patriotism, while others, they said, we work because we have philotimo, pride. I love my discipline and I'm responsible for others. I will retire in 6 years. I would like my students to remember me as a good teacher. I'm working only for self-esteem and philotimo. While another professor, a dean at her department, at her school, say, my motivation is that I have the feeling that I fulfill a higher purpose towards the young students and colleagues, and I hope that I contribute to the common good and is an example to the new generation of academics. This is some of the factors. What is they motivated? Philotimo, self-esteem. Here are my final thoughts, thoughts for food, just for all of us. Academics in Greece face economic problems from 2009. More than 5 years still in this working condition, in an unstable condition. There is no, in reality, motivation to teach, motivation to have a research or services. And this small study noted social responsibility as motivation. You are going to the Maslow pyramid, there is no social responsibility for motivation. They need some other needs to perform, to excel. You need stability. You need some other factors, not the social responsibility. But this is what I found in this research. And maybe I'm coming to the Greek paradox. Not only working for less, because most of the academics in Greece, several, they lost about 35. And if you take into consideration the taxes in front of the salaries decreases, that amount became working for nothing, or working because they have philotimo and social responsibility. This is my study, my results. I'm very proud about them, and really I wish the best. I wish the government of education take into consideration some of the studies, not from here and from locals, from inside, listen and not change the frame law every 5 months and change ministry. In any world, in any country, they don't change ministries and policies for political purposes. Now they will going back to 88. There are several trustees, board of trustees. There will not board of trustees anymore in Greece. And this is something that they have to take into consideration, either how this university, the knowledge as we have intellectual capital. Yes, we have intellectual capital in Greece, but some of those and the number of PhDs and the graduate means that is some of them they're outside, and I'm one of among them. Yeah, thank you. Question?
Yes.
Yes.
I have one actual statement for manipulation, and I would like to conclude. So, it's quite broadly known that Greek students they don't really appreciate the university or higher institution, because the only filter to get into the university is the high grade. I think that it should be obligatory for this as well as it is in university to have an interview. So they think they see your psychology, your thoughts, the person you are, and if you are in line, an agreement with the lines of this university. What do you think about that?
Next question. Yes, this is about high grade. That means they memorize things, and then when they're coming, they ask a question, because I used to talk in Greek universities, from which page to which page. Say, no, I don't want page to page. I want to think about. This is what the state, for me, we can have open access. Come for 1 year, test if you're able, and then remain or not. That means, doesn't mean because you are genius just to memorize and write exactly that means, and some others, probably they don't like exams, like myself, I hate exams, and but I have to go through. But I prefer some other type of exams and entries. Interview will be nice. However, the Ministry of Education, there is several proposals by the rectors. I don't know if you're familiar that a year ago they proposed to have open access. Each university accept particular students with particular requirement. And for instance, the economics, the medical, whatever, they accept the number of students and the qualification. Is not necessarily the one that's coming to economics to know biology or vice versa. But I don't think that they listen, and it's not my my thoughts. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Congratulations for your research. It's really interesting, and it's very sad that there is no motivation in education in Greece. I don't know what's going to be the future of the country without motivation. I would like to ask if you found any correlation between the quality of the education that we offer and the quality of the services that people offer in the working market when they graduate. If you notice any, like, if the quality of education is very low, or when students become professional, do they offer good services in the market, or?
There is a next question, actually. My opinion, quality of education. I believe that the Greek academics, they do very good job. They're really good academics. And there are several students, those that they participate actively, because I used to talk 700 students and only 50, 100 they're there, and 50 they graduated, and I know those 50 where now they are. That means I can say that because we talk under these circumstances, I believe that those that they participate, that really they have the quality under these circumstances. Several professors, they do the best. I don't have opinion for every university, but I have opinion for some universities in Greece that I used to talk, and I have friends, and I know what happened. I don't know for everyone, but I believe as I graduate for a Greek university, and then I came to the US for studies and Netherlands, whatever. Yes, I received a really high quality and competitive education. Yeah, I trust the Greek higher education system. And it's very pity that they don't open position in Greece. And that's why there are several professors from Greece, they going outside. Where is the young? They graduate, they have PhDs. Most of the postdoc PhDs, they're abroad. Why? They have to figure out. And now they said that there is no excellence. And this is some areas that they need further consideration, my opinion. Excellence, I totally believe in excellence. I don't think that all are the same. They need to have a reward, you need to excel, and even the open access policy doesn't mean you don't recognize excellence, because through the interview, as the friend here proposed, you find out excellence through analytical critical. This is a little piece. Of course you need excellence. How you apply for grants, how you apply, you compete with European, with US or all over without excellence. All universities, they're not the same, and they have to recognize it's not the political, that means all you need to say or are the same. All Greek academics, they receive the same salaries. There is no any negotiation about their publication or teaching load or research load. But here in the US, you can negotiate. In Norway, you negotiate. You say, I publish 50 articles. You know, that's totally different. And the dissertation in the Netherlands just received, because they require excellence dissertation, it received, means from the government, 80,000 euro from the government. Each university in the Netherlands received for each particular dissertation, in case that meet these excellence standards. Why? Of course there are excellence. And I don't have particular information, and I don't know exactly what they plan, but what I listen and I read from news and from other stuff, that probably the excellence need to will be an issue. That means all are equal. There is a question from yes.
Just to make a point then, since I'm the chairman of Mechanical Engineering Department of Aristotle University or something, so I can tell you a little bit from what's going on inside. There is excellence in Greek universities. The country is ranking top in soliciting competitive, meritocratic EU research funds. It's a small country of 10 million people. We're leading in soliciting meritocratically research funds from the European Commission.
I know.
Right, so this is the country. So let me explain it. So I fully agree with your statement that not everybody is the same. Absolutely, and we can find wide variability within colleges, in engineering schools especially, which are leading, in my humble opinion. We have all KPIs that we use, key performance indicators, which refer to soliciting competitive funds, publications, spin-off activities. We have spin-off companies. Of course, we operate under the constraints that the Greek state embeds upon us. You very well, since you showed to me, you already understand what we're talking about. And the dramatic changes again and again. A new change is a statement by the Minister of Education that he's against excellence. Philosophically, you can tell if I agree or not about this, or if my faculty agree or not about this, because we believe that the only way to move forward in case like this is really through excellence. Our students demonstrate excellence when they're well sought around the globe, both in the US and leading EU universities. And you raised a huge question. I don't want to take too much of your time. Hopefully, during the next 3 days, we'll be able to chat about it. What is the reason that Greeks don't go back? And I'm not even talking about the academicians. It's a fake scenario there. Only last week, the Minister of Education dictated that they will seize pretty much all research funds that we have in our research committees.
Yeah, I know.
They're going to make an exception. Supposedly, I intervened with the Minister of Education. They're going to make an exception with the European projects because we're going to ridicule ourselves in the European arena. So, under which scenarios would any guy or gal in his or her right mind go back and work in a university when you cannot even make do? So, it's one thing who will go back. The other thing, my thesis is, why is it the most creative and ambitious going to want to leave? Unless you can reverse that trend, there's no reason. I appreciate your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your comments. This is really, I know, because this is a second presentation. I had another presentation in 2012 where I interviewed both females, males academics from Aristotle University, and then there I had more information. And I know about the Aristotle from the interview that they received from EU also the best proposals, they came from Aristotle University. And in one of my slides, I saw you that they try a lot, and those countries without support from the government, they have the best proposal in order to acquire resources from reviewers that are not Greeks, because the review process is totally different for the funds that we use. That means there is a knowledge intellectual capital, but I'm worried for how long this intellectual capital will be there. I totally agree, believe on higher education and the system. I don't say that all universities are the same. Even our figures are not the same. And we need to deal with that. That some they're good, some in the middle, and some they're excellent. And you have to award them. I don't know what will be in the future. Yes. Yes.
Your turn. Yeah.
You outlined a series of problems that exist for female academics in Greece, but it seems to be general for male and female. And also, you outlined a series of problems that we are all aware of. The question is, what are the solutions? And how these solutions are brought about at the level of the government, at the level of individual efforts. It seems that I'm certain, actually, because I have worked for 20 years at Greece, and at the same time I had my profession here. It seems that the potential of the students is great, and this is proven every time the students get out of the country and excel. And also the potential of some of the faculty is also great, but there we need to have an improvement because a large number of faculty came out of what was called nomos plesio. They have proper qualification, and they prevented the renewal of the faculty of the Greek university. And deprive the young generation of an opportunity to return. Because despite all the negative aspects, lots of young people, my experience, would like to take the opportunity to go to Greece and both contribute and have the quality of life that we know we witness in Greece. So there are inherent problems there that need to be corrected that are above the financial problems the country is facing. And the question is, what forces will bring these problems to the fore, suggest recommendations, and see the implementation of those recommendations. For instance, there was the evaluation of the universities by the ADIP. I had the honor to participate in a number of them. I was a member of ADIP before that. The question is how these recommendations are followed up. There is evaluation of the universities, including the renewal of the faculty, how we can bring them up, how we can enforce them. It's not an issue of recommending only, it's an issue of enforcement. So with this background also, this statement, I would like to ask the Council General that mentioned that education, the location of Greece offers educational opportunities at the international level, not at the local level. And what do you have in mind, and how can this possibly be implemented? Because Greek universities can educate not only Greeks, but neighbors around the neighborhood of Greece. Do you have any concrete ideas or recommendations?
First of all, Professor, you know firsthand that we have currently many exchange programs, Greece and the US universities. I mean, Professor Zernis is one of pioneers who first started this kind of exchanges. They are they are going we're continuing very very well. I mean, we have currently I'm talking about only about Boston, so you can um, the BU University is doubling the number of students that they're sending to Greece every year. The Northeastern also community sends people, and university. We're working currently with University of Massachusetts to start the program. Emmanuel College is also doing that. So you can imagine if we're talking only about one, for one country or one specific city in the globe. But he's absolutely right that we should also. That's why I said in my introduction, unfortunately we missed out, that we should try to work on turning Greece into a hub of services. And when I refer to services, I particularly mentioned educational exchanges and also cultural, cultural exchange and diplomacy. And that. We have universities, and I'm not referring only to the universities of Athens or Thessaloniki, but many universities in the periphery.
In the islands.
Yes, in the islands. That they are small universities, very flexible, well, well educated, of course, faculty, and very motivated in Yanina and creative patterns. And we should, definitely work better on expanding the programs. Uh, this is my first note, the first comment. The second one is that we have also private institutions in Greece, in Athens, and they are doing also an excellent job in trying to attract students from Balkans and from, of course, the States. So we see a definite increase in the number of foreigners who are coming to spend some of the semesters in Greece.
Yeah, I hope to continue because this is a long conversation because the new government also, I don't know if you're familiar with the ECTS. This is the credit that you have transferred from European university for one to the other. And the new government required to change this credit transfer and make our participation rather than the credit hours. And if this is happened with a new law, will be the disaster for the exchange, Erasmus exchange, for other Greek programs, especially within Europe. This is a big issue. I can give I can give you my personal thoughts, but I don't see that even of all of my writing and my journal articles and books have been written even from one local. I have suggestions, and the only that I don't expect that they will listen. They're politicians. They change. They would like something different. And the change of the Ministry of Education and the change again and again, they take all the records now with a new law. They will be okay. They require new elections. That means there is some other issues that you have to solve, not the university. The university requires a peaceful stability in order to perform well. That means even you mentioned about the quality assurance. Quality assurance in Greece in 2005, when I mentioned in my work years ago, I use a framework about institutional framework, why this is happening in Greece. There is three types of forces: coercive, normative, or mimetic. Coercive due to law, regulation, mimetic because you have to mimic someone because doing some job. Normative is about professionalization. Data reveals for that particular, for quality assurance, the law was coercive due to the Bologna. They didn't believe it, and even if they established in 2005, only in 2009 they accepted to participate. Several were against, political, all those stuff. That means the quality with the politics, I believe that they're not coincide. And the education need to follow particular path. We can excel. I believe in Greek higher education. There are really excellent departments all over in Greece. Doesn't mean that all are the same. Engineering is the different, chemistry is the different, music is different, and all I know from others they have a lot of motivation to continue to help.
The resistance to comply with the quality assurance evaluation from week to come from the government. What the country.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The government now shut it down a bit.
No, I understand.
Yeah, 2005, Giannakou, but yeah,
I'm aware. I was part of
yeah.
quality assurance and the laws and so on and so forth. The question is the universities, the faculties, in specific departments opposed to the evaluation, but once they realize that whatever, or coerced to comply, everybody went through evaluation. Looking at the medical school of Athens that resisted the most, and I was part of the evaluation. So just eliminate this would be a disaster. But the question is how the disaster can be prevented. Can.
I don't predict anything because I'm not a politician, I'm a researcher. And the politicians, they have to take into consideration those serious questions.
At the core of what we're facing, I really appreciate Professor Zanesis' questions and I think the answers were because I share the same anxiety of what we're going to do. But at the core of it, I think is the lack of the ability of the Greek universities to manifest as autonomous units, exactly like the states. The Greek universities have to have, at the end of the day, the ability to solicit funding to be able to assess, as both of you said, individually, meritocratically, their faculty and reward them accordingly, things that we don't have the ability to do right now. Again and again, that Greek businessmen, we know better than we, that volunteer to fund chair positions in Greek engineering schools, that I can tell you off the record later specifically, where the engineering schools had to decline. They didn't know propose, they didn't know how to handle money. But the problem is that the Minister of Education today, after he publicly said that he would shut down Audi, as a chair of the department, when I tried 2 faculty meetings ago to follow through suggestions of the assessment committee that we had, and the leader of the assessment committee will be here tomorrow with us, is the president of Balance Advisor, a good friend of mine from Chemical Focus. The committee came, ranked us as best department in the country as mechanical engineer. I followed through 2 faculty meetings ago, and I have resistance. And the resistance is much stronger because they feel now that the government also is not supporting that process to begin with. So things that I wouldn't have heard, I heard the statement as the following from a good fact. Mr. Chairman, why do you want to change a soccer team that wins the challenge? One of the recommendations of the assessment committee was to update our curriculum. The curriculum has not been updated since 1999. God forbid, for 16 years. As far as the English-speaking programs, with all the respect to the Consul General, the private universities that exist in Greece cannot match the know-how, the passion, the competitive know-how that Greek Americans, Greeks first generation that with blood, sweat, and tears, they come to the US, they developed their portfolio and they went back to Greece to teach. Greek private universities in Greece don't have that. Public universities have that, and this faculty are suffocated by the anti-entrepreneurial and anti-national policy of the Greek Ministry of Education that discourages even novel, entrepreneurial, extrovert, English-speaking high-quality programs to target the severe market throughout Southeastern European region and the Arabian market for high-quality English-speaking programs. This is a national tragedy. The fact that we don't do what we can to solicit this. There are only 2 exceptions. There's the small Hellenic International University in Greece.
Yeah, the international.
And this is only because of Kostas Gramenos. Kostas Gramenos is shipping, the Gramenos shipping agency in London. Nobody can touch it. So he was able to develop that wide thing, don't touch my excellence. I'm all around the show, otherwise I leave. And there's also the Athens University AUEB of Economics and Business.
No, Alba. Alba is a private university.
No, I'm not talking about Alba, I'm talking about ASOE.
Oh, as well.
AUEB, right?
Yeah.
AUEB, that
the
again, but again, the previous good friend of mine, the previous dean has left.
Yeah.
And he's now in New Jersey.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, ma'am.
What exactly do we disagree? Because you refer to my intervention as a
Oh, I said I'm very polite to begin with.
No.
So I don't believe that the private universities
Yeah,
in Greece have the clout and the quality to offer what we're talking about. We cannot even put it on the same
Of course, I
category.
totally agree. I'm
That's all.
graduate
So
of
we
a public
agree.
university, University of
So we
Macedonia
agree.
in Athens. That's why I'm asking where do you disagree. My only reference to public to private universities is when I refer to the exchanges between Boston and
Oh, I respect that.
and Athens. Okay?
My comment has to do with the fact that
Exactly, just to clarify, I'm totally with you on the public education. I'm a graduate of public schools in my hometown and also in the University of Thessaloniki. And I was only referring to what, because we don't have to, to be, we have to be inclusive. And when we want to attract students from abroad, we have to take into consideration that there are some private institutions that are helping us doing
God bless, and they have to play a role.
Yeah,
The reason that you see me like that, I
I
just came back last night, right? I just came to Greece last night. I'm traveling constantly to the US. I'm a citizen of the cosmos. But again and again, in Greece, I get tired of small public private universities blasting the public schools. Yes, we don't have the autonomy that they have. We don't have the marketing departments to actually create a different image. We don't have the brand name to do that.
But you have
Yeah,
students.
we have the core.
That's
We have the
yeah,
core,
that's the power.
and the core is suffocating. The
Yeah,
core is
but
suffocating.
the private universities now, this is a long story. They can offer hard studies. That means they can offer engineering, they can offer law, they can offer, that means
That's the
it's
problem.
okay.
And even
They
in the
can
soft
live.
case, Madam
Yeah,
Professor,
this
even
is-
in the soft case, even if I go to business school, they cannot match AUEB or
No,
Aristotle
no.
or the
I don't think,
National Technical
this is what I
University.
believe. They doing their job, it's okay. But this is an open market, you have to allow,
Fully
and then there
agree.
need to be a competition. And
I think
this is
we
what,
said-
my proposal probably will be, because this is a really interesting topic, to organize a particular conference, a particular symposium with this type of issues. This has happened at Harvard again on 1909 with Papandreou and some others, and they have a small book about these changes, what they propose. I have the little book. I mention on my books, photos, whatever they mention. However, the proposals for that still remain in the little book. They didn't come into implementation. That means policy formation, implementation exists in Greece without evaluation. That means the circle of the policy in Greece never closed, and nobody knows why they have to change this particular policy. Even if they have standards for evaluation, this is the policy in policy perspective. You have the formation, implementation, and evaluation. Never happened in Greece. What is the evaluation of this particular policy, and why you have to change this policy? As we never evaluate in Greece those policies for higher education. This is the main problem for universities, and really, I believe that Greece people protect Thermopyles, and I know that who is protect Thermopyles. And this is what exactly, because this is a part, there will be a chapter in a book, and this is what I mentioned on my final sentences. A national survey might provide a different picture. Until then, we would remain thankful for those academics who remain and protect Thermopyles.
Thank you, Dr. Papadimitriou. We'll continue with a person we only met 2 weeks ago, and I was quite amazed about her thirst for helping Greece and youth and the situation there, and also how our ideas and visions aligned in the discussion. Ms. Marina Hatsopoulos, an angel investor and CEO of Windy Street, she was going to talk about fostering growth through technology and entrepreneurship. Ms. Marina, please.
I'll try to get us back on schedule. Michael Tiriamos wrote a recent column about the strong growth of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Europe, and despite the bleak economic environment. And I'm in agreement with what he wrote. I thought it was very interesting. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Greece specifically relating to entrepreneurship. In all the debate about Greece, from cries for fiscal responsibility to socialist rhetoric, everyone's talking about how to shuffle the money around. And what is so frustrating for me watching from the sidelines is that there's no discussion about growth. At the end of the day, there's no money there. And so the way to get money is not to find it from someone else, but to generate value, to create value and grow. And if Greece is able to grow, it will have the money to deal with its long-term problems. Now, I'm not talking at all about its short-term issues and repaying the debt. I'm not talking about next week or next month. I'm talking about the long run. I'm talking about 10 years and 20 years from now. Where will Greece be? Will Greece exist? Will it be growing and thriving? And I would like to posit that the landscape today is actually a very fertile landscape for entrepreneurship, because you've got some key pieces there that actually could set Greece on a new trajectory. For one thing, the phenomenal and discouraging unemployment rate is terrible for the people there today. However, without these government jobs, with unemployment high, and with a very well-educated, as we learn, youth, you now have a talent pool that can go and do something. And they've got nothing better to do. They've got nothing to lose. And this is a great starting point for building startups. So just a brief recap of the Greek economy. We all know it shrank 25% over 6 years. And the loss of 1 million jobs resulted in unemployment of 28% and over 50% for the youth. Over 200,000 Greeks have left the country, and many of them are educated and highly skilled. But the Greek economy was just starting to grow before the new government took place because of all the frustration, as we know. And unfortunately, I think that may be leading us back to, we'll have to see how that goes. But what we were starting to see is some movement in the right direction, which is the economy starting to grow. Beyond dealing with the current crisis, Greece needs to focus on what its competitive advantages are. Just like any company that's in crisis, you kind of have to look inward. What do we have that's different? What is our product differentiation? And looking at Greece, the competitive advantages are in agriculture and food, tourism, IT, and logistics. Also, Greeks are natural entrepreneurs. You can see that. If you look in the United States at all the immigrant populations, of the Greek immigrants in the United States labor force, 16% are small business owners. That's the highest percentage of any other immigrant group. And that just goes to the character of Greeks being very independent, sort of willful, scrappy people. In Greece, what is really exciting to see is a huge change in mentality, with government jobs no longer being available, and the Greeks seeing what's happening around the world in the startup community. You're now seeing incubators and accelerators, awards. All of this is blossoming, and legislation is removing some of the barriers to entrepreneurship. Dan Eisenberg, I don't think is here today, but I think he's coming this week. Was actually just in Athens last week speaking about scaling up existing businesses. And that's another very important part of the whole growth promise. It means taking an existing business and making incremental changes to help it grow. This is a critical engine for growth. But on top of this, we need to start new ventures. You can only grow whatever ventures already exist. So you got to start new ones. Without startups, there's nothing to scale up. What is the end goal here? The end goal is employment. You've got a lot of people looking for something to do, for work. If a startup gets an idea off the ground, it can then get funding and it can hire people. It might hire 10 people or 20 people. And over time, that will go somewhere. Either they might sell the business, they might continue to scale up the business, or the business might go under. But interestingly, even if it goes under, For one thing, you've employed people for a period of time and you've educated them, and now they can go back and do it again. And one thing you'll find is that most successful entrepreneurs have a failure in their history. So failure is not a failure. A failure is a stepping stone to success. Many successful entrepreneurs go back and do it again over and over again. And one thing you'll see about the ecosystem in Boston or Silicon Valley is that when you have one successful startup, all those founders and early employees then, let's say if that company is sold, go off and start something new, and they mentor and they invest. And all of this builds. It takes a long time to build. This is not something that happens overnight, but it does happen. And it also becomes aspirational. All it takes is a few sales of these companies, a few success stories, that other young people look at that and they say, wow, that looks interesting, that looks like fun, I want to be a part of that. And then that grows from there. I have to say, Greece's scrappy culture is similar to that of its successful neighbor, Israel, and I think there's a lot we can learn about that. Heavy on talent, tenacity, assertiveness, and critical independent thinking. Both countries also have a strong global perspective. When you go to Greece, everybody speaks English. And I have to say, it's striking. I was just speaking in Guadalajara, our neighbor here, you know, they're so much closer. Nobody spoke English. It was amazing. So that's a huge, huge asset for Greeks. Comparing it to Israel, Israel's entrepreneurial ecosystem is further along. It's got 47% of its adult population university educated, as opposed to 27% in Greece. But still, and it spends more on R&D, 4% versus Greece's 1%. But still, there's no reason why Greece can't emulate it and grow into that. Both countries require military service. Of course, Greece is in the enviable position of not having to have the same kind of military experience. Overall, though, what you can see is a path. You can see where Greece could be, what Greece could become. There is 30 times more venture capital attracted in Israel than in Europe, 30 times. That was in Europe, compared to Europe. And that's from a standing start. There is absolutely no reason why Greece can't follow those footsteps. About 20 venture funds exist in Greece today, and they invest a total of about 1.2 billion euros in Greece. Depending on where you are in this, that may sound like a lot or a little. These are very small seed investments. So generally, these companies ultimately have to go and get subsequent rounds of funding elsewhere, but it's a start, and it'll grow from there. As success is seen, it will attract more and more capital. And for any venture capitalist working here in the States, you see there are only so many deals. They're all very picked over. There are so many funds and so much capital that they're looking for new opportunities. So if Greece can show some success with some startups, they will attract more funding. And there's obviously plenty of wealth from shipping. So as that community becomes more educated on investment in startups, that will generate more capital. I want to talk a little bit about my work. I'm working with the MIT Enterprise Forum in Greece. And what MIT Enterprise Forum does is it has a conference in the fall to bring startups and to bring speakers from all over the world to talk about the startup experience. There's a startup competition which is taking place right now. We're down to 25 finalists. We're recruiting visitors from Boston's tech entrepreneurship scene, and all of you are invited. Send me an email. Love to have you join us to go to Athens as the first ever sort of trade delegation to go to the award ceremony at the MIT Enterprise Forum on July 1st, network with the entrepreneurs there, provide mentorship, connections to the US, investment, just to forge partnerships between the Greek diaspora and Greece. And then I just found out this morning, we got funding to bring 10 entrepreneurs from the MIT startup competition over to Boston for a one-week startup boot camp at MIT. So they will get hands-on training on starting up their business, everything they need to know, and also get them connected. They'll do a pitch in front of investors here, and they'll get more connected to the Boston entrepreneurial ecosystem. Last Thursday, we hosted an event and brought in 3 entrepreneurs from who are doing startups in Greece to hear from them and what they had to say. And it was very interesting and illuminating. They said it was easy to raise 50 to 500,000 right now in Greece, but that's not enough to get traction to get to a stage in order to to attract more investment from European venture capital. So there's a little bit of a gap. They're able to get the very early seed funding, and there is capital available on a larger scale when they get to a certain point. But there's still a little bit of a gap there, and hopefully we'll be able to fill in that gap. They said devaluation for the startup community is not an issue, and they said regarding bureaucracy, yes, there's bureaucracy, but that's not really there's so many challenges to starting up a business that's not their biggest challenge. They argued that there is not a brain drain, that there are people leaving, but that the greatest brains are actually staying in Greece, that it's a great place to live and to work, and that people are staying. So that was very interesting to hear. They talked about compliance issues in Greece, the high taxes, payroll taxes, issues regarding laying people off, restrictions on human capital, being able to lay people off, the kinds of freedoms that startups have here. So certainly there are some areas where the government legislation can help continue to improve the sort of startup business friendliness of Greece. The biggest issue is lack of stability with the laws, that the laws keep changing all the time, and so it's very hard for people to plan. We asked the question to these entrepreneurs, how can we help? What can we do here to help that? And they encouraged Americans who understand how to make investment to make investments directly in the startups or in any of these Greek venture funds. They encouraged this sort of interplay, bringing Greek technology entrepreneurs over to Greece from the United States and bring those entrepreneurs from Greece over here to learn and to have that exchange. So what's needed for the Greek government is to open markets, reduce bureaucracy, and provide tax incentives to encourage investment. But honestly, the Greek entrepreneurs aren't waiting for that. So it's exciting to see they're moving forward. They're going to solve their problems their own way. Some of Greece's challenges, the high unemployment, the low access to capital, and the small local markets are actually some of its strengths. They enforce the fundamentals of strong startups, which is the availability of well-educated talent, motivated by equity as opposed to cash, a focus on profitability, and early globalization. These are all things that startups should be doing anyway. And it's interesting, during the boom years here in the United States, you saw a lot of very weak startups because there was so much easy capital available that companies were not building these sort of fundamentals of building a strong business. So it's hard, it's a tough pill to swallow, but ultimately I think it will bode well for Greece. Startups take years to scale up and impact the economy. So it's not gonna be a fix for Greece's liquidity crunch today or next week. But over the coming years, as these startups grow, this can really change Greece's trajectory. Greece can look very different 20 years from today than it looks today. And I hope we don't lose this opportunity. It would be a shame after everything that Greece has suffered over the last few years to have that go to waste. It could actually be a motivation to change and to do something fundamentally different. Now that the underpinnings required for a fertile innovation ecosystem are finally in place, Greece, whether it's on the euro or the drachma, ultimately does have the opportunity to grow and to thrive if this continues. So I would love to hear any of your questions on this. Yeah.
You mentioned that, thank you, it was very informative and very helpful, and appreciate that. But I noticed a significant discrepancy between something you said and something you heard last night.
Yeah.
In particular, you mentioned that the entrepreneurial spirit in Greece is strong and alive. And as evidence of that, you suggested the entrepreneurial sort of like component of what's happening here in the States. As an initial point, my impression is that may be a wrong comparison because clearly a biased sample of the Greeks that are in the States, and that's clearly not necessarily representative of what's happening in Greece.
Yeah, well, first of all, also I should mention that's absolutely true. You're going to have it's a filtered pool that's coming over here, and I should also mention that the small business owners here are generally not high growth. They're not entrepreneurs in very high growth. They're often diners, pizza owners, things like that. But I was speaking more to the character.
Right, and that's what I want to focus on this as well. Last night we heard a speech. I'm not sure if you were present or not. That there was a study, et cetera, et cetera. To make a long story short, there were 3 reasons that were identified as being the main obstacles to entrepreneurship in Greece. And the speaker asked us to volunteer for what those reasons were, and a couple of us said bureaucracy, a couple of us said financing. Said yes, bureaucracy was number 3, funding was number 2. Number 1 was lack of entrepreneurial spirit in Greece. And that is sort of like just about 180 degrees out of phase with respect to what at least I understood.
I shouldn't speak to this because I don't really have enough experience, but the little that I've seen is I think there's a generational difference. So I think that there is a tiny pool of young Greeks that are very excited about entrepreneurship. I don't think it has pervaded the culture as a whole. But I definitely experienced it. I saw it directly myself, but I can't speak to how pervasive that is as a whole.
That's what I think about startups.
Right.
I'm sorry.
The thing is, Ms. Hajopoulos is referring really to the startup. So it's not a general comment about the whole thing. But her experience has to be connected with the startups, with young entrepreneurs who are just innovations and companies, brilliant ideas according to her.
Yeah.
So it's a part and not the whole thing.
Exactly. Right. And I think from what I understand, the older generation of Greeks had a set of experiences that led them to be somewhat risk averse, and that what has happened over the last few years has sort of fundamentally affected the psyche of the young Greeks, to have them be less risk averse. Yeah.
Just would like to comment on the younger age entrepreneurial spirit. There are a lot of cases that people started trying to do something, but they met that with the bureaucracy system.
Mm-hmm.
It was hostile taxation.
Yeah.
And sort of IRS anyway in Greece. They are either deciding to leave the country or to stop doing anything and wait to see what will happen in the next days, in the next years. But even though with the current situation in the market, the bureaucracy, the lack of funding, all problems that exist, we believe that we could attract direct investors from abroad.
Yes, I do. So I think there have already been a very small number of successful startups, and some are attracting outside capital. I think the easiest thing right now at this moment in time is to attract Greek American capital. So people who have had successful experiences here and want to give back to the homeland. And then I think that will grow from there. So then you need a few more successes, and then you get half a dozen. Now it attracts more. But I have to tell you, I had one of the leads of a Greek venture capital firm here a few weeks ago, and he wanted to meet with local VCs, venture capitalists here in Boston. And I reached out to some friends of mine and said, I don't know if you're interested, I don't want you to waste your time if you think this is a waste of your time. They were interested. They wanted to hear what was happening in Greece, and they were quite interested in it. And because these funds have gotten so big, and there are only so many deals to go around in Boston. And so they need to look outward. They need to find other places to invest their capital. So yeah, I think absolutely. But it's important that the government not mess it up.
More details.
Yeah.
In what industries? Because you mentioned earlier about agriculture, IT, logistics. And,
Yeah, tourism.
tourism.
Yeah, although software is the bulk of what I've been seeing, IT.
I'll talk more about logistics. Pretty much, I really appreciate it because that's McKinsey type strategic core competencies of Greece profession. It's a great little abstract you can find it on the web by McKinsey. Greece 10 years ahead. So it's one of the few areas you can find that there's a strategy of what are the core competencies of Greece and what would be the rising stars, the 6 rising stars of the years ahead. And Greece emerging as a transportation, a regional supply chain management hub is one of the 6 of them. So I'll talk your kind of invitation, I'll talk about it more. But coming back to the 2 ladies' point that I fully agree, yes, there is this great trend among young kids. It's because of the young kids that I'm here actually. But fundamentally, going back to the gentleman's statement, indeed, the under-entrepreneurialism is pervasive throughout the state and throughout the legislation. So we can talk, and I worked and I did my PhD and I worked for years in the States. So you can be patriotic and you can go back, but the moment you start your effort is in creating a new business, and you encounter the millions of agencies that you have to contact, you counter the perennial uncertainty that you don't know what is going to be the day tomorrow. The moment that I try to create a new graduate program at the university targeting Europeans to be able to come and speak, teach in English, that moment when you have to face that, you see that the country indeed does not think we need to act.
Yeah.
So I think you're correct about that chasm that is defined between the generations, but unfortunately, the elder generations dictate the rules of the game, and the rules of the game are prescribed by the Ministry of Competitiveness. Why is it again and again, after so many different ministers, we haven't simplified the process of creating business? Despite all the great words. Why is it, you mentioned Israel, right? Why is it that whenever I spoke to Greek ministers and I spoke to the Greek parliament about boosting innovation, when I spoke about Israel as an example, I was blasted. As a chairman also of the Alexander Innovation Zone for 3 years, I was blasted. Why do I have to look at the cosmos around me? Greece is a unique case. So you're going to find this from public servants again and again to give you that speech that Greece is a unique case. So you want to talk about Israel? Let's talk about Yosma Fund. Israel is listening to the Yosma Fund 80s, right? I'm going to give you. You asked me for $1. I'm going to give you the buck only if you bring $3 from 4 embassies, because it's not my business as a public servant to assess what is innovative or not. If you make it my business, then you open this interaction becomes open to corruption.
Yeah.
So let the private people that you bring on the table identify if it's innovative, then I will match you. But then I will ask them return investment. I would like to sit on your board for 3 or 4 years. You can buy me out after that, and I'm going to judge where taxpayers' money, how will they use it? Do we have new positions open? Do you guys recruit new engineers? We spent millions in Greece of creating technoparks with no assessment whatsoever of where I can talk to you. Or where the money went. Where the money went. So think about the situation that I'm a businessman and somebody gives me 9 or 10 million for free. Sorry for that.
Yeah.
If I go back to the comparison between what Greece is doing and what Israel is doing in the area of education, Israel has welcomed and invited every academic leader that is in the United States or in Europe to go there and actually work and interact with the Israel. Greece has not done it. I will touch on this point more on my presentation, but there is a tremendous pool of academics here who could contribute multiple
That's a great point.
to education, research, technology, and so on and so forth. We have not done this great resource. We have not done the great resource of the young people who have been educated here and would like to go if they were given the opportunity, and the opportunity is not there. So these are issues that need to be tackled. And if the academics go back, then entrepreneurship would possibly benefit us.
Absolutely.
The company is started establishing an academics research incubator. You can imagine the projects and all that.
I know.
It is really,
I have to do this.
you have to try really hard in order to keep this track of learning.
Yep. Any other? Yeah.
You mentioned at the beginning of your presentation how problematic nine/11 discourse was going on talking about conservation of as much as Koreans are responsible for generating this crisis, it has been very much exacerbated by the cultural process going on in the past. Had this unconventional austerity approach so attempted to counteract athletes like Harris. This one-dimensional approach to the U.S., which is very much looking at multi-dimensional stimulus-oriented approach, interest rate reduction, massive financial stimulus. So, going back to yesterday's presentation, one of the big problems is the lack of finance when you're unemployed or working like basic marginals that flat. It's a big problem. Why I would like to hear your argument on this. What exactly, how macro level policies regarding this is unrealistic macro level business affect entrepreneurial opportunities.
Well, for one thing, I don't think it affects it hugely because startups are working in their own little world, and so it, in some way, it's more just discouraging to be in an environment where, people are sort of hopeless, where things are negative. But I think it does have an impact when there are certainly many aspects to legislation that could be much more business friendly. And this idea of having the government co-invest with private venture capital. So there are a lot of things the government could do to make it more business friendly. In terms of macro, changing policy all the time, just in and of itself, is that sort of instability makes it an unwelcome environment for people to invest. And then reneging on promises also makes it an unwelcoming environment for people to invest. But at the end of the day, those macro factors have to be resolved for the whole system to work and to function properly. And I guess I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
I guess my question is just that I'm a history scientist. I'm looking at the structural causes of the crisis, which are systemic full monetary with the absence of measure. I mentioned this integration policies that of course, the center of gravity completely speaking to the way, which is really asserted this broad austerity policy that really hasn't changed at all. But as we the economy trends, 5 years we haven't done integration rates jumped 105%, 175%. So I guess.
But at the end of the day, Greece needs to buy its independence, and it needs to solve its own problems. And You know, there are a lot of things. I think at the end of the day, blaming your the person who's giving you money isn't productive.
Not necessarily trying to, I guess what I'm saying, the relevance of the discussion of growth. You guys are kind of American or an expert.
Mhm.
What this bank does is it provides credit lines
Mhm.
and financing for small businesses to create transactional costs, you know, distributors.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any conflict for it. So I guess I agree with you. We don't know how to have this objective here in my house. They're much not.
Mhm.
There puts walls around it. And less than that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. They have a lot of hurdles, and doing a startup in any environment is challenging. But I guess I would argue that it's a little bit of an inherent advantage that they have. You know, having started up a business back in '94 during the heyday of the internet, when it was just kind of coming out, it was impossible to hire software engineers. Literally impossible. As a startup, you couldn't afford a software engineer, and we ended up hiring a chemical engineer to do our software. You know, in Greece, you can afford to find a really smart, well-educated, talented software engineer. You know, it's like you have different challenges. Yeah. Is that it?
I have one.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, like, as an investor, 1 or 2 points that it's something we can do to change and attract some investors to Greece, apart from the political situation, which we cannot control?
Right.
Something that will not only attract but also keep beside us investors, because it's quite easy to attract the attention, but quite difficult to develop yourself over time. So, from your experience, where is the Greek companies like stuck, apart from the funding? That something we need to do.
What the Greek startups are starting to do is employ actually the model that the Israelis do, which is to have a group of developers in Greece and then ultimately come over here, have the CEO come over here and have their market-facing activities here, which makes a lot of sense. So you keep the development team in Greece, and so you're still helping employment, but by having access to capital here, you have U.S. headquarters, so people are more comfortable investing. And then getting plugged in here to the networks for partnerships and for hiring people. And I think the primary way people can help, besides direct investment, is actually helping the companies when they do come over here to get plugged in, so that they can find people and the connections that they need. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We'll continue with Dr. Lawrence J. Simons II, Professor of Classical Studies, Director of Undergraduate Studies, Boston University.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Είμαι πολύ ευτυχισμένος που είμαι εδώ. It's good to see so many of my friends here. The Consul General, my good friends from Harvard, Mr. Mati Sastra, my colleague from Boston University. So it's a tradition, and I want to thank especially Vasiliki Rapti for inviting me, and Christos Chrysokoulou for making it possible for me to be here. You can all decide whether you think it was a good idea or not after I give my little talk here. I have some handouts. Maybe could I just pass these around?
These quizzes?
It's quizzes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
I'm going to the Minister of
is this for me?
Education of Greece.
Yeah? Okay. So I spent the first 10 years of my academic life working on the problems of the Athenian Empire and the way the Athenian Empire in the 5th century BC financed itself, where the money came from, what the Athenians did with the money, how it related to Athenian democracy. You may be surprised to learn that in the 15 years since that, I haven't been asked to give very many talks on this subject. Believe it or not, not that many people in the world are very interested in ancient Athenian political finance, imperial finance. So there's a long tradition among ancient historians that you begin with the apologia. You have to defend your topic. You know, why would anybody want to write about this? It wasn't so hard when I was a 25-year-old graduate student writing his dissertation. You have to have a topic to write about. There seemed to be a good one to write about, and so I wrote about it. I come to find out that virtually every great scholar in the 19th century had written on this subject, and so there were piles and piles of German books that I had to wade through to actually find out what I had to say on this subject. It is true that historians like to talk about the relevance of their topic, and yet you will almost never find an academic historian who's willing to go into an environment where real questions are being discussed and give a talk. And I suspect the reason for this is that we realize that we'll be savaged by people who know something about the real world. So I'm prepared to be savaged. If you want to launch on me, go ahead. You have every right to do so. But of course, the great master of ancient history was Thucydides. Thucydides, who believed that history has to be useful. And the reason that we study history is because we believe that similar things will happen in the future. So I want to start with Thucydides and end with him. You'll see this very ominous quote at the top of the handout here, something that the Athenians say to the Melians in this very famous dialogue where the Athenians are about to take over the little island of Melos. Very powerful and rich Athens says to the little city of the Melians, we want you to join our empire. And the Melians say, well, we don't want to join your empire. We'd like to just be neutral if you don't mind. We're after all a colony of Sparta. So it would be nice for us if you could just let us remain neutral. And the Athenians say, that's not going to work for us. We have 150 warships out in the harbor that say it's not going to work for us. And the Melians say, well, the gods will protect us because, you know, the gods believe in justice. And the Athenians, if you could write a laugh in Greek, I'm sure that that's what Thucydides would have written right there, because the answer that the Athenians give is the text you see in front of you. The Athenians say, about men we know and about gods we believe that by a necessary law of their nature they rule wherever they are able. People will rule wherever they are able to do so. That's the way human beings are. And if you've read your Homer, the Athenians imply, you will know that's the way the gods are, because Zeus doesn't give a rat's patootie about justice. He cares about ruling. And then this is it's an ominous text, and it's been quoted by political scientists and historians throughout time. I think what Thucydides is suggesting to us is that we should not be surprised by acts of self-interest. People and states act in their own self-interest. This shouldn't surprise us. But can they ever act beyond their self-interest? And this is a question of economics and finance that I'd like to put on the table for us today. But first, I have to defend the idea that ancient economics are irrelevant at all to the modern economic world and modern finance. Is there any reason to study the ancient economy in a way that could help us with the modern world? Well, for a long time now, it's been popular to talk about ancient economy as embedded. And what sociologists and anthropologists mean by that is that the ancient Greeks and Romans and the ancients in general didn't think in economic terms. They didn't see an economic sphere that was separated from everything else and say, well, let's evaluate this in economic terms. You know, what's the best financial decision here? How will we make a decision based on how it will benefit us or benefit the state economically? The very popular idea has been that this is not the way the ancients thought, that they looked at the world in terms of a nexus of relationships that involved religion, politics, family, etc., and that any economic decision was always embedded in these other decisions about society and about your family and about religion, that you wouldn't make an independent decision based on economics alone. You would always be making that decision connected to other things. And so it's been hypothesized that the ancient economy was not rational, that the ancient Greeks and Romans didn't have a rational idea about how to manage their economies because they didn't know how to separate the financial world from everything else. And now I think this idea is nonsense. I don't believe it at all. And I don't believe that the ancient economy was so embedded that the ancients couldn't make rational economic decisions. And I could, give you reasons and examples that I think that, but I'll just stipulate that I think it's true. And what I've done here is I've given you a list of things, a list of ways that the ancient economy differed from the modern economy. And the question that I put to you is, who is irrational here? Is it the ancient Greeks who were irrational, or is it the modern West that is irrational? And I will make the case that we moderns are far more irrational in our economic approach than the ancients were. So if we just go down this list, I mean, in the ancient Greek world, money consisted of gold and silver, specie. All right, so there was no question about the value of money, because the value of money was right in front of you. Money couldn't be converted into any kind of valuable thing that gold and silver can be converted into. The modern economy is based on floating values of currencies. What's the euro against the dollar today? Was it 105 to the dollar? What are we talking about? 1 to 1, basically. Last summer when we took students to Greece, it was 140 to 1. So I don't know which is more rational. Actually having the gold and silver that you can do something with, or wondering 6 months from now how the euro is going to be floating against the dollar. If you want to exchange currencies in antiquity, you could do it based on weight. Now, it's true they didn't usually have to take the time to weigh coins, because people understood that an Athenian silver drachma is about the same as an Aeginetan silver drachma, but the Aeginetans are a little heavier, so usually the time wasn't taken to weigh these things. But where there was a question, you could simply resort to weighting. We have some Persian silver coins, we have some Athenian silver coins. Let's weigh them out and see which one has the most silver. In the ancient world, there was very minor government regulation of trade, and in the modern world, as you modern West, we have very vast regulation of trade. Maybe not as vast as it will be in the future, but trading regulations get more and more complicated all the time, which is more rational in terms of allowing businesses to start up and decide what they're going to do. The idea that we don't know what the next government regulation coming down the pike is, or the idea that the government's never going to get involved in this issue. And it's true that in antiquity, sometimes there was protectionist regulation. We don't want this state to trade this kind of good in our area, but that thing was very rare. And it's usually done for political, military reasons, is my next item on the list here. And in the modern world, we've gone back and forth between whether we think protectionism is good or free trade is good. And of course, whenever you hear modern Western leaders talk about negotiating a trade agreement, the reason that they're negotiating a trade agreement is because there is not perfect free trade between the states, because if there were, there'd be no need for a trade agreement. So we have a very complicated system that, depending on the regime in power, we could have a protectionist regime or a free trade regime, which is more rational. Skip down to the taxation. We have relatively low taxation in the ancient world. The ancient Greeks hardly taxed themselves at all by modern standards, whereas we have relatively high taxation in the modern West. No income tax at all in most Greek states in antiquity. Athens never had an income tax in the classical period. In the modern West, virtually every Western state has very high income taxes, which is more rational. Property taxes in Athens were paid very irregularly, and they were very low when they were paid. And in the modern world, I don't know where you live, but where I live, I pay very regular and very high property taxes. And it was a shock to me to find out when I bought a house that I didn't actually own the house. The state owned the house, and I get to pay rent to them every year for the privilege of taking care of this property that's supposedly mine. The last two are really the most important ones. In the ancient world, government spending was controlled by the money available and political considerations. But the money available was the most governing factor. In other words, the ancients could not spend money they didn't have. The ancient Greek could only spend money that they actually had. Now they had to vote and determine, are we going to spend this money or not? What are we going to spend it on? But there was no way to spend money that didn't actually exist. In the modern world, our spending is controlled, in the modern West, it's entirely by politics. The question of whether money exists or not is not on the table, at least not in the United States, it's not. Because we've been spending far more money than we have for a very long time. So we control our spending based on political considerations, not actually on available money. And the ancient Athenians, one of the things they did that I studied so much in graduate school was they borrowed money from their gods. Now that sounds completely irrational. How do you borrow money from gods? It's crazy. What kind of interest rates do the gods require? This was an interesting subject, and the Athenians figured it out. Athena wants 7% on her annual loans. But during times of war, she was willing to reduce that interest rate to about 1.5%. So Athena was very reasonable as gods go in terms of their loans. Now, of course, the Athenians were setting those interest rates themselves. Athena's money existed in a treasury. The monies had been dedicated to her. The Athenians said, we can borrow this money from Athena, we can use it to fight our wars, and then we will pay it back to her at a rate of interest. She'll actually profit from this borrowing. Athena will profit, but the money existed in their treasuries, okay? So in the modern world, how do we loan ourselves money in the modern West? We borrow it from our children and our grandchildren. We write a check and we say our kids can pay for it, or their kids can pay for it, right? That's literally what we're doing with deficit spending at the level we're spending it in the United States anyway. So is the Athens practice irrational and the modern practice irrational? I'd easily make the opposite argument that their practice was rational and ours is irrational. So I've mentioned Athens several times. And, you know, most of these examples come from the period of the Athenian Empire. This is what I've spent most of my time working on, although I've been writing a biography of Pericles for the last few years. The background of, Athenian democracy is talked about endlessly. Whenever I'm asked to give a talk somewhere, it's always about Athenian democracy. That's what people want to hear about. They don't want to hear about the Athenian Empire. The Athenian Empire would just kind of put over in a corner and say, well, at the same time that democracy occurred, there was also this empire thing, but we're not going to talk about it, all right? So I'm going to make you listen to a few minutes about the Athenian Empire. The two things are related to each other very directly, I think, the democracy and the empire. But what we have to appreciate is that the Athenians didn't build their empire out of some kind of desire to lord it over other Greek states. They had a rational reason to construct the warships they constructed and to build the empire they built, and it was Persia. Because the Persians had invaded Greece several times, as you know, and they had everyone shot, been beaten every time they showed up in the Balkan Peninsula. But there was no guarantee that the Persians weren't going to come back. In fact, there was every reason to think the Persians will be coming back. And so the Athenian Empire was constructed originally so that the Athenians could protect themselves and the rest of Greece from another Persian invasion. And to do that, the Athenians said, we're going to collect money from you every year. All you Greek states are going to give us a certain amount of silver every year. We'll look after it. Don't worry. We'll put it on a little island, Delos, very near Mykonos. We can, have a party over there. Then we go back to Delos. We'll give them the money. It's a nice place. And so the money will stay there, and it'll be there in case the Persians come back and we need to build an even larger fleet. Now, the other Greeks signed on to that as a perfectly reasonable idea. The Athenians had proved their value as a military power in the invasion of Xerxes in 480 and 479, when they, along with the Spartans, primarily repelled the Persian invasion. What I want to mention is that before this ever happened, 3 years before this, in 483 BC, the Athenians had made a very large silver strike in Athens, in mines that they considered public mines. And with this extra money, they usually just gave the public money out to the public. Now imagine what a strange idea that is. I mean, we know today that public money doesn't actually go to the public, right? Public money is kept somewhere and then other things are done with it, but the public is certainly not going to get it. But when the Athenians had public money, they simply gave it to the public until somebody came along with the idea. It was Themistocles, who said, look, instead of just distributing this money, and it was a big chunk of change, maybe half a month's pay for everybody in Athens, let's take this money and build a bigger fleet. Because we've got a pretty sad fleet right now of only about 60 warships, and if the Persians come back, they're going to come back with a very large fleet. So let's build a bigger fleet. Plus, we have this other stage, Aegina over here, that we're always, they've only got 60 warships, we'll have a much bigger fleet. We've got 2 reasons to do this, let's do it. The Athenians voted to give up that money that was about to be given to them. And this, to me, is the first great moral victory of the Athenian people. The Persian wars, you could argue, were won at that moment. At the moment the Athenian people said, I will give up that half a month's wages that are about to be given to me so that we can build a larger fleet and actually protect ourselves if the Persians ever attack. This is that incredibly rare moment in the history of democracy. If you can find another example where a democratic state citizenship votes to decrease the amount of money that it's going to receive, right? These are very rare moments. So the Athenians did this, and subsequently they're able to defeat the Persians. The Greeks are able to defeat the Persians. So after the Persians leave in 479, right? Yes, exactly. After the Persians leave in 479.
Very good.
Oh, I thought you meant great that we beat the Persians. Yeah, I agree. I always threaten to my students every year that if they're not good, I'm going to let the Persians win this year. That usually quiets them right down. But So after the Persians left, the Athenians organized this league of Greek states that moderns call the Delian League, because they kept the money on the island of Delos, the money that these other Greek states paid in every single year. Now the Athenians provided the treasurers for this money, and they called them Hellenotamiai, which means Greek treasurers, and there's a good name for them. Now, I'm sure some of the other Greeks said, so they're going to be, all of us will provide treasurers, right? And the Athenians said, no, it'll just be us. There won't be Athenian treasurers. They're going to call them Greek treasurers, all right? So the Athenians provide the treasurers. For the first few years, did I mess something up here? I'm sorry. Completely technically incapable. So for the first few years, that money just accumulated on the island of Delos. Fairly large sums, 400 talents of money. How much is a talent? 26 kilograms of silver. What does that mean? 6,000 days' wages for a really well-paid man. All right, that's 1 talent of silver. So we got 400 of that rolling in every year onto the island of Delos. Now, the Athenians had apparently, according to Thucydides, promised to the other Greeks that we're going to not only protect you from the Persians, but we're going to make war on the Persians. We're going to make the Persians pay for what they've done to Greece. That means taking the war into Asia Minor, at least, and doing some things to the Persians there. But what happens in the first few years of the Delian League is that the Athenians don't campaign against the Persians. In fact, the Athenians go around to other states and ask them the following question: would you like to be a member of our league? And the other states sometimes said, yes, we hear you're protecting us from the Persians, very good, we'll join up. And sometimes the other states said, no, we'd really rather not be a member of your league. We're not willing to pay this tribute every single year. And when the Athenians heard that, they said, no, we think you would like to be a member of our league. And we have some warships in the harbor that suggest that maybe you should rethink your decision. And that's what they did. Now, what is amazing to me is that some small Greek states said no to the Athenians, even when they saw the warships in the harbor. And this is a testimony to the Greek character and their belief in freedom and liberty and eleftheria, that even in the face of undoubted defeat, there was no question that the Athenians were going to win in the end. Some of these small Greek states had said, no, you're going to have to fight us if you're going to take us. It's the same attitude the Greeks themselves showed to Persia on a different scale. So what happens eventually is, after about 10 years of this, one of the larger islands, Naxos, said to the Athenians, look, we joined up in this league initially and to fight the Persians. We haven't done any fighting of the Persians. We've been going around to other Greek states, forcing them into our alliance. So it's been fun for 10 years, but Athens, we'd like to leave now. We're going to withdraw from the alliance. You go your way, we'll go ours. Everything will be cool, just like it was before. And the Athenians said, nah, I don't think so. And they brought their fleet and said, maybe you want to rethink this. And Naxos, who had a fleet of about 60 ships, as opposed to the 200 that the Athenians had, said, no, we want to leave. So the Athenians made war on Naxos and forced them to stay in the alliance. And at that point, the Delian League, in my opinion, has become the Athenian Empire. Because at that point, you were no longer free to leave, right? You were free to join, but not free to leave. At that point, the Athenians begin, it seems to me, to think about the money that had been coming in to protect Greece from Persia as money that might be used for other things. It might even be used for Athenian purposes. So in 454, you see the parallels already, right? So in 454, the Athenians suggested that they get the money off the island of Delos. It's so hard to get over there. I mean, Delos is really a pain. Let us make it a little easier. We'll just bring the money from Delos to Athens. Well, we'll still have the Hellenotamiai, the Greek treasurers, but they're all Athenian, and they'll be looking after the money. And we'll look after the money here. So they bring the thousands of talents that had accumulated on the island of Delos to Athens. And in 454 BC, suddenly Athens begins to spend money like crazy. After 454 is when the Athenians build the Parthenon. It's when they build the new temples all over Athens. It's when they built the Odeon. It's when they built new walls, new roads. And suddenly, they began to pay Athenian citizens to do things like vote on juries. Around the year 450 to 444, there was apparently a great political debate in Athens between Pericles and the people who supported him, and between a guy named Thucydides, son of Melesius, and the people who supported him. And the issue was basically, what are we going to do with this money that we collected from the other states? And Pericles suggested we're going to build the Parthenon and a lot of other beautiful things with it. And as Pericles says in Plutarch's Life of Pericles, the money belongs to the people who receive it, not to the people who paid it, right? So we received it, We're protecting them from Persia. Nobody's seen a Persian for 20 years, but that doesn't matter. All right, we're protecting them from Persia, and we're going to build these amazing buildings with it. And at some point, Pericles stood up in the Athenian assembly and said, and I think all of you on Athenian juries are massive things with 500, 1,000, 1,500 people on them. All of you on these Athenian juries, you should all be paid to sit on these juries. And now the guys in the assembly are the same people who are going to sit on the juries, and they all held their hand up and said, yes, absolutely. That's a great idea. Pericles just says we should be paid to do this, and I agree with him. This is the best idea I've ever heard. Now, if you put yourself in a political environment where your opponent is proposing to give public money out to the voters, ask yourself how you oppose that. What successful strategy do you have to oppose someone who says, I will give the voters more money? Is your strategy, no, I'm saying you should get less money. I'm saying you should not get that money. Well, this is apparently what Thucydides, son of Milesius, Pericles' opponent, was saying, and the Athenians ostracized him. They voted to get rid of him. This guy is saying we shouldn't get money. Pericles is saying we should. Out with him, in with Pericles. And this begins Pericles' run of consecutive years as the leading statesman in Athens. Turns out the only way to actually oppose Pericles was to be the guy who said, Pericles thinks you should only get 2 drachmas a day to vote. I think you should get 3. Oh, now this guy is better than Pericles. He thinks we should get more money to do this. This is much better. So Pericles strangely gets maneuvered sort of into the center. He becomes a kind of old fuddy-duddy, more conservative type guy, and it's the politicians coming along saying, oh, you should be paid for other things, to serve in the boule, to vote even. Eventually, Athenians are paid to vote. But one of the things about this situation that I find so disturbing is that arguments from prudence become extremely ineffective in this kind of environment. Because I can imagine the guys opposing Pericles getting up and saying something like this. Look, we're rich right now. We've got a ton of money sitting over there in the treasury, okay? But what if the Persians do come back? Or what if we end up in a war with Sparta? Yeah? What if we have to spend a whole lot of that money on warfare? Then how are we going to be able to pay for people to sit on juries and people to sit in the boule, right? That maybe it would be wise if we don't spend all of the money we have right now on the assumption that everything will always be the way it is now. And I think this is one of the major economic fallacies that exists in the world today and existed in the ancient world, that people make political decisions, economic decisions based on the philosophy that everything will be just the way it is now, right? We'll always have this available. We can always keep spending. We can always keep doing X, Y, and Z. But that's not the way the world is. If you're an ancient historian, I got to tell you, civilizations keep collapsing left and right. I mean, unfortunately, this is what happens. Now, I'm sure ours won't collapse. Of course not, because history ended sometime in the late 20th century, as we know, and everything now is going to continue just the way it always has. So this only applies to the past, of course, not to today. I won't go through the list of the things the Athenians did during this period to arrange the Aegean to their own advantage economically, but I'll just mention a few of them. The Athenians very quickly developed ways that they could arrange the Aegean economy to benefit Athens. Is this a surprise? No, Thucydides would say, of course not. This is what people do. Yeah. So one thing they did is they took prime pieces of real estate in other states away from the people who owned them and then put Athenians on them. So I don't know, let's just take Cambridge. All right, there's pretty high real estate values here. And Brookline, we'll take Cambridge and Brookline. Right? We'll just throw everybody out of their houses in Cambridge and Brookline, and we bring the people from Worcester in, all right, and say, here's your new house. Right? Here's your new farm. Okay? So this is what happened. This is the way the Athenians created clericies of Athenian citizens all over the Aegean. Now, when those Athenians went to live in other states, they got special tax privileges, right? Well, we can't ask you to pay the property taxes of Brookline. Well, those taxes are crazy. No. You'll pay a special tax, and you'll pay it to Athens, all right? Not to the local tax. So the tax base of these other states is diminished. The Athenians transferred legal cases to Athens. If you had a legal problem with an Athenian, your case wasn't heard locally. It wasn't heard on Naxos or Samos. No, the case got transferred to Athens, where it would be heard by an Athenian jury, which of course would be extremely impartial. I mean, an Athenian jury is going to be, they're not going to just go for the Athenian, right? So they locals didn't like this at all, getting this stuff getting their legal cases transferred to Athens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened? Some of these states got angry about it and started to resist. Some of them stopped paying their tribute every year. So the Athenians had to send out the navy to collect this tribute year after year after year. And sometimes they had to fight little wars to make sure the tribute got paid. Actually, eventually Sparta found this situation intolerable, and Sparta's ally Corinth in particular, which was one of Athens' trading competitors. And so the Athenians went into a series of wars. Really, it's not just one war between Athens and Sparta. It's a series of wars that start in 460 and don't end until 404. It's really 50 years of warfare off and on with Sparta and her allies, which was extremely expensive for the Athenians. When the Athenians went to war with Sparta in the big Peloponnesian War, the one we all studied, 431, Pericles makes a speech in Thucydides in which he says, basically, we've got 6,000 talents on the Acropolis. Let the Spartans come, right? We got money for days. In fact, not only do we have the money, we have the gold and ivory statue of Athena up there. Have you all seen it? It's amazing. That gold on Athena is all made so we can lift it off and melt it down. We can melt, see that, is this rational or irrational? All right? We have the very wealth of our gods, the god herself. We can melt that money down and use it to coin money to fight the Spartans if we need to. Let the Spartans come on. This is Pericles' speech to the Athenians. That was 431. In 428-7, they had spent almost all of that money. 3 years later, it was gone. And the Athenians had to start taxing themselves, property taxes, to pay for the war. So Pericles' policy looks perfectly rational as long as we have 6,000 talents on the Acropolis. But once we don't have that 6,000 talents on the Acropolis, we're going to make the same policy. Athens had, I think, lost the moral authority that she had gained in the victories over Persia. And this is one of the great tragic stories of 5th century Greek history, that the Athenians had proved to the other Greek states that not only were they equal to the other great powers, who were Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, etc., they were greater than the other great powers. And to understand what this was like for Athens, you've got to imagine that 6th century Athens was not 5th century Athens. It's the 5th century when the Athenians become what we think of as Athens. In the 6th century, Athens is a second-tier state, scrambling to try to maintain her status. But after the Persian Wars, the Athenians became unquestionably the greatest power in Greece, and they became the moral authority in Greece that could speak to the issue of how we protect ourselves and what we ought to do to protect ourselves. And that's why these other Greek states were willing to sign up and say, yes, we'll be part of this league. But we find 40 years later, the Spartans able to go out and say to the rest of Greece, we are fighting for freedom against the Athenians. Against the Athenians? The ones who shouted freedom when they attacked the Persians at Salamis? How could the Spartans make a credible claim that they were fighting for the freedom of Greece? But they did. And Thucydides says most of Greece was on their side for this very reason, because they believed Athens had lost that moral authority that she gained in her victory over Persia and the protection of Greek freedom. Now, that's one of the very bad things that comes out of the Athenian Empire, but there are other things that are almost as bad, I think. The Athenians had decided that they could vote an income for themselves. That when Pericles or others stand up and say, why don't you vote to pay yourself to serve on a jury, or pay yourself to serve in the assembly, or pay yourself for this, that voting yourself an income was acceptable, good, and proper. Now compare that with what they did in 483, where they voted to say, we will give up our money to build the fleet we need against Persia. That's a huge change in the society, from voting to give up money to protect yourself against Persia, to voting to pay yourself even in the face of needing that money to do other things, like fight wars. Okay? The Demokratia had been connected very directly to the empire, because people like Pericles and other Athenian leaders were able to stand up to the Athenians and say, when we go out and we force these other states to pay us, that money is going to be converted into things like the building you see behind me here, and the jobs that go into building it. That money is going to be converted into the people who get paid to serve on juries and the people who get paid to serve in the government. All right? So there was no disconnect between those things. They were perfectly joined in the Athenian political world. The rationale of the Athenian Empire was perfectly understandable to Athenians. You could compare the British Empire in the 19th century, where it was perfectly understandable what was going on here and why it was being done. And you could also make the claim that many good things were done by both empires, you know, and those are things that are important and we need to remind ourselves of. But is any of this relevant, Professor Sanders? Okay. Get back to the point. All right. What's relevant about this? I think that Athens teaches us all kinds of important lessons. And I'll just say that, look, Athens has been admired as the most important state in antiquity for 2,500 years for a very good reason. That the Athenians created more masterpieces of literature, philosophy, art, and thought than any comparative nation state. Take any nation state you want. Pick the one you want. Compare it over a period of 75 years, and I'll put the masterpieces we have from Athens in the 5th century against it, and I bet you I'll win every time. And we don't even have most of the stuff the Athenians created. We've got everything the British Empire created in the 19th century, virtually. But with Athens, we have a tiny fraction of their masterpieces. So there's all these reasons for us to admire the Athenians, to see them as models. But they were also trying to tell us some very, I think, scary lessons. Thucydides in particular is trying to tell us about some things about ourselves as human beings. So Athens pursued an imperialist economic policy that benefited the Athenians in the short term. But it weakened Athenian civic mindedness and generated hostility with Athens' former allies. It was very profitable for Athens in the short term, but it created a situation where the Athenians voted themselves into debt and voted themselves into war. Remember that in ancient Athens, the people who voted were the same people who did the fighting. It's not the kind of world we have today where we got a bunch of old codgers who vote to send the sons of people who live in my home state, Arkansas, to go out and fight their wars for them. The war itself, the war between Athens and Sparta, the wars between Athens and Sparta, and the political conditions in Athens, made Athens and Greece less able and less willing to protect Greece, southern Greece. They weakened Athens and southern Greece in a way that allowed Macedon, under Philip and Alexander, to subjugate southern Greece. I mean, a lot of historians will tell you there's no chance that the Greeks could ever have defeated the Macedonians, and I find this to be an absurd argument. The Greeks defeated the Persians, right? 30,000 Macedonians marched down and fought the Greeks at Chaeronea in 338 BC. Am I supposed to believe that it was impossible for the Greeks to mount a successful defense against that? What happened is they lost the Battle of Chaeronea, and then they said, we give up. Done. We're not going to fight you anymore, Philip. That's not happened with the Persians. The Persians, they lost battle, and then they fought again, and they fought again. And eventually the Persians went home. So something has changed. Major powers in advantageous political and economic circumstances should practice prudence. And not pride. Not assuming conditions will always remain the same, always remain stable, squandering their moral authority, not alienating and disenfranchising former allies or smaller, currently less economically viable states. Those states may be important to you at some point. States like modern Greece may have a strategic importance that you don't recognize it at the moment. In fact, I would say you ought to recognize it. There's all kinds of reasons that Greece is strategically important. But beyond that is simply a moral question and a prudence question. What's the right thing to do and what's the prudent thing to do? They're not always the same thing, but sometimes they are. Historical factors can and do play a role in political and economic decision making. But what happened in the previous generations does matter in the present. It affects the way we think and it affects the way we vote, and it's perfectly reasonable for it to do that. The ancient Greeks never forgot who fought for the Persians and who fought against them. And only 30 Greek states opposed the Persians. Athens and Sparta and Corinth leading them. Thebes was on the wrong side in that war. And nobody forgot that. The Spartans and the Athenians and the Corinthians didn't forget it. Right? Those things play a role in the future, but they are usually overshadowed by issues of expediency. In the end, Sparta would ally with Persia against Athens. That's hard to imagine, but it happens. 412, Sparta and Persia are in alliance. Later, Athens and Persia would be in alliance against Sparta. Thebes and Sparta were in alliance against Athens, and then Athens and Thebes were in alliance against Sparta. Yeah.
Is there any other permutation?
Yeah, every possible permutation of the Sparta-Athens-Thebes alliances happens between the years 404 BC and 362 BC. Every possible, over a period of one generation, every possible permutation happens. Winston Churchill said states don't have friends, they have don't have friends, they have interests. Okay, that's very much putting Thucydides' maxim into just another form. States don't have friends, they have interests. Okay, which brings us back again to Thucydides, and I'll just end with this. As dark and grim as Thucydides' vision is, the work of the historian must in the end be hopeful if he thinks what Thucydides thinks. Thucydides' work has to be hopeful, and the reason for that is there is absolutely no grounds, no cause to produce a work like Thucydides' work unless you believe people are capable of making other decisions. Thucydides shows us how people usually are, but that doesn't mean that's the way they ought to be or can be. The project of the historian is to offer us these lessons so that we can say, maybe we can do it differently. Maybe we can act prudently. Maybe our actions, where economics are concerned, can be more fair and more prudent than were those of many of our ancient forebears. And that's what I have to say. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. No questions? Yes, sir.
Very fascinating story that you outlined for us. But two things. That Pericles started the whole thing, but he was out of the picture a year later after the war. And the question is, the policies we implemented earlier, how they influence the people succeeded, would become more demagogues that would do it for their own personal interest and influence who lead to make decisions. There was a corruption in the process, and we went from a democracy to a sort of more policies as opposed to democratic policies.
Well, I mean, this is exactly what Thucydides says, that once Pericles was out of the picture, the Athenians turned to the types of leaders who were more willing to play up to their worst instincts. Whereas Pericles, Thucydides says, was willing to say to the Athenians, you're wrong and I'm right. Right? This is if you can find a modern Western leader who's willing to do this, I'd love to see him. Just find the guy out there who's running for office and will say, look, most people believe this and they're wrong about that. All right, I believe something different from the majority, and I'm going to tell you what it is and try to convince you to go with me. Now, this is the thing that makes Pericles a leader in Thucydides' mind, and I think it's what makes anyone a leader. But once you have this environment created where you can get power by appealing to people's self-interest, right? I'm going to bring you X. I mean, and let's face it, in the modern West, you basically have two political ideologies. One of them is, I'll make sure your taxes are lowered so you can keep more of your stuff. And the other is, I'm going to raise the other guy's taxes so I can give you more stuff. Right? And then those are basically the two ideologies that exist in the modern West. They're both based on self-interest. Yeah. So you can't really. I mean, what Thucydides foresaw, I think, was this was the policy that this was the soup, the chemical soup that had been created. The only thing, in my view, that will prevent that is a moral character in the populace. Is that if you can't appeal to people based on what's the right thing to do, yeah, then you've really lost. You're going the wrong direction in the end, in my opinion. So you have to be able to appeal to people based on prudence and on justice. And of course, that means that we got to all be willing to practice those things.
The scenario played out in Athens also pretty much was repeated in the Roman Empire in the last century before Christ, where dictators and politicians were promising to the public X, Y, Z, were getting power, and eventually led to all kinds of problems.
Yeah, the Roman economy was far more complicated than the ancient Aegean economy. But the Romans did have these problems, but then they managed to pile a whole bunch more problems on top of them this being Romans, of course, they weren't satisfied with just the ancient Greek problems. They had to expand them into a whole new set of other problems that they built higher and taller and built excellent roads to. But that was it's true that they suffered from some of the same things. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Your narrative, very presented about how lots of themselves together. Modern day tax Greece, which is a big problem. You know, lack of leadership, lack of rise of responsibility. No one wants to invest in this. Who wants to invest in this where it's fits? That's what in large part of there. Very relevant.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, I would just say that this talk, as I think about it, really needed to be given not in Greece or at the Greek Economic Forum. I mean, I think it's more relevant to other states. It's more relevant to Germany. It's more relevant to the United States. I mean, I think that the big lessons here from ancient Athens are for them. What, in terms of squandering moral authority, the United States has, I think, done a lot of that. When I hear anybody in the U.S. talk about the Greek economic problems, I find it laughable because we've gone so far in the direction of creating our own problems. And then we're being propped up right now by the fact that the dollar is the way you buy oil. It's the reserve currency of the world. We are, quote unquote, too big to fail. And the rest of the world's economies are shocked and afraid of the idea of the American economy collapsing. But we're in such dire straits in terms of the fundamentals, I think, of our economy that it's just a matter of time. So I just don't think America is in any position to be dictating to other countries. And of course, Germany's in a much worse position to be dictating. Yes.
This actually is a good lead into the question I want to ask you, and that is if you do the dichotomy between ancient Greece and modern West, which one is more irrational, I would venture to propose that they were both irrational, or to put the positive spin on that, they both had some rational elements and some irrational elements. As you look around the world today, from the lens of having this mutual understanding that you share with us today, we appreciate that. As you look around the world, from Greece to the US to Brazil to Singapore to Norway to South America, do you see any place where there is an attempt of trying to come to a closer consideration of an ideal composition of the rational elements of both approaches?
Oh my gosh, what a horrible question. That's definitely the hardest question I've ever been asked. No, I don't. Because it seems to me that we've accepted an idea of Western social democracy almost everywhere in the world, in the first world. And with that has come an idea that politics really is the governing control of economies. And I just think this is a horrible idea. Now, what you see with Greece, and I'm not an expert on the EU and Greece relations, but is that this idea that from the outside, a rational solution can be imposed, right? This is the way this thing is being presented to the world. But in fact, you've got two completely different views of economics. You mentioned Keynes before, right? So you've got one idea, which is in this situation, we'd be stimulating the economy and pumping more money in. And the other is we should use a neoclassical approach and go to austerity. I mean, this isn't really, it's a political debate that's founded on a disagreement in economics. So how do you solve that problem? But I would just say, you go back to the moral question for a second, that I think that Germany should keep its mouth shut. Whatever the realities of the economic situation are, it's not, I don't think it's helpful. What happened in the past matters. And I don't find it helpful to have German ministers pronouncing on Greece's economic situation. A lot of things are being said publicly that I think should be said privately, and I think this is true of the current Greek government too. The Thucydides Melian dialogue is a private dialogue between the representatives of the Melians and the representative of the Athenians. They are in a closed room, and in that closed room, they say some very hard things to each other, right? All the niceties are pulled apart. But that kind of conversation is not appropriate publicly. And so when you're trying to find a solution to a problem, I'd like to get all these guys together, put them in a room for, I don't know, how long, Consul General? I don't know, 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, right? We'll give them some water, right? What else can they have? A pizza, French fries, maybe? I don't know. And say, until you come up with the solution, you're not coming out, and you can't talk to the press. I don't want to hear your comments about whether there's going to be a deal or whether it's not, whether we like this minister or we don't like this minister. This one wears a tie, this one wears shorts, this one's got a hat on, this one's, what are we talking about here? This is nonsense, right? Those kinds of conversations have to go on privately, and this irrational, what's happening here irrationally is the political falls-all that goes on around it. I don't know if that answered your question at all, but anyway, it was a really hard question.
What you just described is in essence what Clinton did with the Yugoslavia crisis. He essentially tricked them into going there and more or less said, you know, you guys aren't going anywhere. The question I wanted to ask though is coming back to what you said right at the beginning about the engaged economy being embedded. And you seem to imply, regardless of the answer to that particular question, that at the moment we have this idea that the economy is a sort of separate sphere that I would dispute that. I think part of the problem we have right now is that economics is everything. There's a lovely little book by an author called, I don't know her first name, S.S. Michael. You can tell the author is a woman because the names use initials because they don't think called monoculture.
Is this the J.K. Rowling theory of the...
There's a lot of it about right the way down to whatever the woman called who wrote 50 Shades of Grey, and that's E.F. something. Another little book called Monoculture, and in which she describes how, whereas the dominant theme of the first half of the 20th century was science, the absolute dominant theme around science today is economics, principally because of the success of the American stock and so if the ancient economy was embedded, I don't even know how to describe this, other than perhaps as some huge quilt that just comes and sits on us all. Just walk from here.
Yep.
You know, walk
Yep.
get down to Harvard Square, and you think you have a moment of relief in the quads here. But the instant you get even to Harvard Square, economics is going floor the whole time.
Yeah.
And you feel it especially, I think, when you get to the United States. But when whoever is here from Greece gets home, economics is going on the whole time. And I think that's part of the problem. So I would disagree with this idea that it used to be, maybe it was embedded in a nicer way. Maybe it was embedded in a more less granular way. But right now, economics is certainly weighing on everything we do, even in those countries that don't have 322 billion euros to find by next year.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with that. In fact, I would say that you could argue more easily against the ancient economy being embedded, which I don't believe. You could argue that today, the rest of society is embedded in economics.
Yes.
That's where the embedment has actually occurred, and that's where it's felt. And I'll just say, I wrote a book some years ago called What's Wrong with Democracy? And in that book, I argue that every society in the end will have some kind of defining principles. Even if it denies it has defining principles, it will create them. It has to have them. And that this risk we're seeing is that these economic principles will become the defining principles of the society. At that point, what kind of society do you have? There's something above which you gauge, that you gauge yourself against. It has to be something other than purely economics, I think. But anyway, I don't want to make this go longer than our time. I appreciate you all very much having me here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Simmons. It was quite entertaining. I always like to be lectured on Greek history from non-Greeks. Like
His
your,
presentation, we have to say that. I mean, you really went through the effort. This is not a classical academic
it's quite
presentation.
difficult.
I personally want to commend you and I want to thank you because it was a Renaissance man's presentation. I learned a lot and I really thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to a short break. We'll take a break for an hour approximately. Now it's 12:15. So, 1 hour break, and we're coming back for more speeches. And then we'll thank you very much.
Okay, that's great.
Take one of these also.
No, thanks.
Πάρα πολύ.